welcome to the channel. Today I'm super excited because I'm going to be showing you a quick and easy tutorial on how to make a dress that has 2 rows of tiered gathered ruffles. The dress has short sleeves, and then the dress also has a zipper in the back. So I just wanted to give you guys a heads up that this video was actually part of a live stream. So in some areas the footage looks a little different because it's a mixture of the live stream footage and then a mixture of just the regular footage that I usually show you guys in my tutorials. So don't be alarmed, it's alright. Okay, so here I have my front and back torso block patterns, which are available for download for free on my website. I also have a tutorial on how you can make one for yourself based on your own measurements, so check the links in the description box below. So I just placed my front torso block down on some tracing paper, and I'm tracing from the top of my front torso block, and I stopped at the waistline. So here I'm just kind of connecting the little pieces that I traced, and I decided to make my neckline a little lower, so that's what I did there. And then now what I want to do is I'm just bringing back that front torso block, and I want to extend the waistline so that it's gonna fit looser at the top, and I decided to extend the waistline by 2 inches. So I'm just making a mark where the 2 inches fall, and then from that 2-inch mark I'm connecting it to the bottom of the armhole curve, and I'm just making a sort of like diagonal line, and then from the bottom of that line that I just made, I'm just going to draw a horizontal line to close the bottom of the pattern. And I use my L ruler to get a more accurate line, and this pattern right here is basically the bodice block. So if you hear me mention the bodice block, this is what I'm talking about. Here I'm just titling the pattern, so I titled it front bodice block. I added the grain line, and then I also wrote that there's no seam allowance included, so I'll have to remember to add seam allowance when I trace it onto my fabric. And I also want to make note that I will need to cut this piece on folded fabric, so cut on fold. So here I am just tracing the front bodice block pattern, and I originally had traced the armhole, but I shouldn't have, but it's okay. So here I'm just kind of connecting the lines that I traced, and now I'm going to take my back torso block and I'm going to line up the shoulder of my I'm going to line up the shoulder of my back torso block to my front torso block, and then I'm going to trace the armhole of the back torso block as well as the neckline of the back torso block. So then I'm just connecting the marks that I made so that I have a straight center back line, and you can see I crossed out the old armhole. And then I'm titling this pattern, so it's back bodice block, no seam allowance. I added the grain line, and because I'm going to add a zipper to this, I'm not going to cut it on the fold. So then I'm just going to cut out this pattern. Okay, so now what I want to do is I want to start working on the pattern for my sleeves. So I'm starting with my sleeve So I'm starting with my basic sleeve block, which is also available on my website. And I had already measured where I want my sleeve to start. So I just measured from under my armpit to where I want my sleeve to end. And I just measured and marked that on the sleeve block pattern. So here I'm just tracing the sleeve block pattern, and then I'm going to stop right where that mark is, where the sleeve will end. And then I am going to basically just use my L ruler to draw a horizontal line that's going to connect one side of the sleeve to the other side of the sleeve. And I'm just closing up the pattern by tracing the other side of the sleeve. And then I'm tracing the notches for the front and the back of the pattern. And then I also labeled the pattern with flip 1 time for opposite sleeve, and seam allowance is not included. And I added the grain line as well. So these are the 3 patterns that we have. And now I'm going to measure from my shoulder all the way down to where I want my dress to end. please, please, please don't make the same mistake that I did. Make sure that when you're measuring from your shoulder to where you want your dress to end, make sure that your measuring tape goes over your boobs, because otherwise your dress will be too short because it won't include the volume that your boobies take up. So make sure that you put your measuring tape over your boobies, unlike me, okay? So once you have that measurement, you're just going to write it down, and here on the screen I have the math that you'll need to do in order to get the measurements for those two ruffle tiers that are going to go underneath the bodice block of the dress. So here are the measurements, and if this is unclear, just leave me a comment and I will do my best to help you. So I knew that I would need all the fabric that I could get in order to make the ruffles for this dress, so I decided to make the dress out of a full-size bed sheet set, and I'm using that fitted sheet, which I really hate folding this sheet. It's so annoying. Anyway, these are my two back bodice block patterns, and this is what I mean by flipping one of the pieces so that you get a piece for each side of your back. This is the front bodice block here that I've already traced, and here I'm just folding it in half. And then once I've folded it in half, I'm taking another piece of scrap fabric and I'm going to fold that in half as well. And then I'm taking the folded front bodice block and putting it on top of the folded scrap fabric, making sure that the folded pattern for both pieces line up. And then I'm tracing the neck hole and the shoulder as well, but I'm not tracing all of the shoulder. I only traced about like 1 inch of the shoulder. So here I'm just making it a little darker so that you can see what I did. And then once I remove the pattern, so I'm going to just pin it into place and remove the front bodice pattern. And then I'm going to measure about 2 inches out and make a mark. And then from that 2 inches mark, I'm just going to continue like duplicating the lines so that it looks something like this after I cut it out. And that little U thing is going to be our interfacing that's going to help stabilize our neckline. So I just serged the outer edge of that interfacing piece, so it looks like this. And now with my bodice block with the right side facing up, I'm taking the back side of my bodice block and I'm lining it up so that the side seams are stacked on top of each other, and I'm just going to sew on the seam allowance line of the side seam, and I'm going to repeat the same thing with the other side of the back bodice block piece. And I'm just going to do a simple straight stitch on both sides, and the machine settings are here on the screen. And once I've finished stitching them, then it will look something like this. Okay, so now that I've flipped my pattern over, you can see that's the neckline, and these two half circles are the armholes. So I flipped my pattern over to the right side facing up, and I'm taking that interfacing piece and I've just lined it up with the edge of the neckline, and then I'm just pinning all around the neckline, and I'm just going to do a straight stitch about a 1/2 inch down along the seam allowance all around the neck hole. And here I am just stitching and stitching and stitching away, and when I'm done it'll look something like this. Now this is pretty stiff, so to make it more flexible I'm just cutting along the seam allowance space until I get to the seam allowance stitch, but not cutting through that stitch, and this is going to help the neckline to be more flexible. So once I've done that, then I'm just flipping the snipped edge of the seam allowance. I'm tucking it down, and then I'm just going to do a top stitch as close as possible to where the seam is. So it's basically like stitching close to the ditch. And I just again want to make sure that that bottom flap is down, and it'll look something like this. As you can see, I stitched close to that seam but not on it. And when I tuck it down under like this, it'll look something like this, nice and neat and finished, and you can just iron it to make sure that it stays in place. So this here is my fabric for my 2 rows of ruffles, and what I did was I just kept the sheet folded so that I wouldn't have to make a super long line, and then I just made my 2 horizontal lines for the 2 rows of ruffles. So basically when I cut along those 2 lines and I unpin everything like so, you'll see that it actually opens up to that full rectangular pattern that I will need in order to make the ruffle. So if you're using a lot of fabric, I definitely suggest folding the fabric vertically before cutting it. So the next thing I want to do is I want to gather this rectangular fabric, and I'm going to use my gathering foot, and I do have a tutorial on how you can gather fabric. There's about 5 different ways that you can do it if you don't have a gathering foot. All of the materials that I used for this tiered ruffle dress is on my Amazon storefront, and the link is listed down below in the description box, so you can see all of the supplies that I used for this dress. So here I'm just stitching on the seam allowance line with my gathering foot, and you can see that it's starting to gather the fabric to make our ruffle. Again, check out the link in the description if you want to learn other ways to gather your fabric. But when you're done, it should look something like this. So now I want to attach this ruffle to the bottom of the bodice block by flipping it over so that the right side of the ruffle is sandwiched on top of the right side of the bodice block pattern. And I just want to start by pinning the sides together, so the left side and the right side together, and then from there in the middle I'm just kind of using my hands to readjust the gathers so that it lays flatly and evenly all across the bottom of the bodice block. And then I'm just going to do a straight stitch along that seam allowance line where the gathers are. And when I'm done, it looks something like this. Ta-da! So we have 1 row of ruffles done, and we're just going to repeat the same step with our second row of ruffles. So again, I'm just pinning the 2 sides of the ruffle to the 2 sides of the bodice block, and then I'm just going to adjust the ruffles so that they lay flatly and evenly on the bottom of the row above it. So for full transparency, I used the elastic method for the bottom ruffle just because I just felt like it was a little bit more easier. So then to finish the bottom, I'm just going to fold over the bottom of the dress and do a straight stitch. So now this is the back of the dress, and I'm just going to hem the back neckline by folding it over and doing a straight stitch on both the left and the right side. So after I've done that, the next thing I want to do is I want to connect the shoulder seams with a straight stitch. So here I am with my sleeve patterns, and I'm just relabeling the front and the back of both sleeves. So I'm taking one sleeve and I'm making sure that the front part of the sleeve is laying flat, and then the back part of the sleeve, when I fold over the sleeve, it'll be that the back part of the sleeve is on top, right? And this is important because you want to make sure that your sleeve is properly installed. So once I've figured out the correct placement of my sleeve, I'm just going to line up the armhole of the sleeve to the side seam of the dress, and then I'm just going to pin all around the armhole of the sleeve. That doesn't make sense. All along the armhole, I'm going to connect the sleeve to the armhole like how I'm doing right here. So once I've finished doing that, then you'll see that I basically have a full circle like this, and what I'm going to do is just do a straight stitch all around the seam allowance line for the entire armhole. And when I'm done stitching, it looks something like this. And if I just stick my hand through and pull out the sleeve, you see that the sleeve is like like this. So now I just need to close up the sleeve by sandwiching the 2 side seams of the sleeve on top of one another, and then just doing a straight stitch on top of the seam allowance line. And then I went ahead and I serged all the raw edges that I had. Usually I serge each pattern, but I decided to leave the serging for the end. So this is what it looks like inside. And then when I flip the dress over, you can see I have both sleeves installed. So I decided to install an invisible zipper. I have a super helpful video linked in the description box that you can watch if you're working with an invisible zipper as well for your dress. So once I installed the zipper, it looks something like this. And then what I did was I just sandwiched together the 2 open side seams of the dress, and I pinned it down in place, and then I did a straight stitch from the bottom of the zipper all the way down to the bottom of the dress. And it looks something like this. So the dress came out super short because I forgot to put the measuring tape over my boobs. So if you think that I should turn this dress into a spaghetti strap dress, leave this pasta emoji. And if you think I should leave it as is, then leave a heart emoji. Let me know. If you have any questions, leave me a comment down below. I'd be happy to help you out. Thank you so much for watching this tutorial on how to make a tiered ruffle summer dress with sleeves and a zipper. Be sure to check out my other videos, hit that like button, and share some love in the comment section. Until next time, ciao!